Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Let's talk Ravens Lions. Today, we're unpacking every little detail about what went on in this game. A big time win for the Ravens, a huge and a horrible loss for the Detroit Lions. Now, I'm not going to overreact to this. I'm not going to say the Detroit Lions are not a good team. I'm not going to say it's the same old Detroit Lions that we used to know. But I do want to say there's a lot of things I could point to, and it's kind of a good loss. Although it was 38-6, you say, how is that a good loss? Nothing about the game was good, and that's true. But at the same time, I think you learn some things and you understand. I had a coach who always told me, when you play against a good team or a team who has a good record and a body of work, never judge them off their ugliest game. If you do that, you're going to be in for 60 terrible minutes because they're going to beat the heck out of you. So I'm not looking at the film. If I'm a team ahead of them, if I'm the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday Night Football next week, I'm not looking at their worst game on film. I'm looking at the body of work, understanding what the team really is and what they're capable of. They had a dud, but we can say just about every team who we feel like is good up to this point, they've all had duds. Nobody's undefeated in this league anymore. 49ers had a loss last night. Pretty ugly one. Lost to the Minnesota Vikings. However, though, before we get into this video, I do want to say I'm recording this moments before I head to class, so let's drop likes for those algorithms. Let's drop down below in the comments. Tell me what you saw in the game, Ravens fan, Lions fan. We're talking about it all, but I do want to touch on this fact. Big time win for the Baltimore Ravens. I'm extremely proud for the Ravens because I've went to bat for Lamar Jackson. I've talked about Lamar Jackson extensively, especially with his film. Some of the different things that I saw as a strict pocket passer. This is not talking about getting on the run, all of the RPOs and the different things. This is not talking about that. Drop back, traditional passing the football. Get on that back foot, release. And I think that now he's gotten better to a point where we can confidently say, and I think a lot of people have felt this way, but he's been a guy who's been inconsistently elite. Now I'm seeing him play at a high level consistently, and you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers game, you look at the Indy game, you have some lapses in that game. You lose to the Colts in overtime, you lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He has interception in that game, and then he has some drops from Zay Flowers, Nelson Aguilar. It's an ugly game all around. But when you have games like that and say, okay, I'm looking at the other games in which they've won. We got to pay attention to the body of work. I think that it's huge for Lamar Jackson that he's gotten an elevated supporting cast. You bring in a Todd Monken. I'm a big-time fan of what they're doing in the passing game. I was not the biggest fan of Greg Roman's pass concepts, his schemes in the passing game. But I think that now you have a scheme which is predicated on a team who can throw the football. You got guys. When I look at Greg Roman's scheme, I felt like if they got behind, they were going to struggle because they didn't have good passing designs. It wasn't fundamentally sound for Lamar Jackson as a passer. So I look at all of that and say, okay, we can point to the playoff success. I think that was a reason in it. It's not the sole end-all be-all, but that was a reason in it. And then you look at Todd Monken, I think if we get into playoff football, he's still going to be able to pass the football. If they get down one or two scores, they have the possibility to come from behind. So overall, a big-time win. You still got Zay Flowers learning on the fly. He's learning from Odell Beckham. Odell's not what he used to be, but he still can teach you a lot of gems in the game. You got Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, looking at those guys. I like how they've been able to keep the running game going with Gus Edwards, and you got guys like Justice Hill, although J.K. Dobbins is hurt. Speedy recovery for J.K. He's a very good player. I liked him out of Ohio State, and he's just been hurt just about every year. But we look at that and say, okay, the defense is the defense. Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, Jadeveon Clowney, they got a lot of guys flying around, especially in the back end. Geno Stone, Marlon Humphrey, still a good corner in this league. So I like what they have working, a big-time win, but I do want to get on the Lions for a little bit, and I want to start off with defensively. I think you got beat fundamentally. And what do I mean when I say fundamentally? I think it's a mixture of coaching. I think it's a mixture of communication. And I think it's a mixture of some of the things that we have to understand as corners and linebackers, getting outflanked, having certain leverage and certain down and distances. I didn't see a team who looked as if they were coached up to win a game like this. Now, we understand players have to make plays as well. But we talk about Aaron Glenn and some of the things within his scheme. I felt as if, okay, if you're going to play man, because I saw a lot of man looks where they had linebackers buzzing underneath. And I think that if you're going to do that, just run zero. if you really feel like you can guard these receivers, and I understand you may want a safety over the top, but I feel like, okay, maybe you can run single high. I would run zero and send the pressure, but if you run single high, still send one of those linebackers. Don't have them buzzing underneath. Make Lamar make a decision. Now, you also have the problem. Lamar is a guy who, if you send that pressure and you miss, which sometimes they did not get any pressure, but if you blitz a guy, now you don't have a linebacker who's sitting there who could spy him and come make a play on the football. And then you also have a guy who can run free, get big time gains in the running game like Lamar Jackson. So I understand some things with Aaron Glenn, but I think that if you get too conservative, if you overthink some of the things which I just mentioned, now you're in a situation where he's going to kill you anyway. So that's just the first thing that I could talk about. And also from the linebackers to the corners, how many times, and this is where I get back to coaching, how many times have they seen guys, and this was Patrick Ricard, this was Mark Andrews, they killed the Detroit Lions on this play. They're setting up the block, it's looking like a run play, and then they release. They're blocking. Now I'm releasing and getting upfield. I'm wide open. Linebackers, safeties, we have to understand if we're in this situation, we got to pick them up. I think it has to be a lock call or somewhere in the defense that we understand and we communicate that. Okay, if I'm thinking it's a run play, I'm a linebacker, I'm still eyeing that tight end. It is tough. It really is tough. This is why I say fundamentally, you have to see this look in practice over and over and over again. And maybe they did see the look in practice. I'm not into Detroit Lions practice. Maybe I'm saying some things about Aaron Glenn where the players know where they're supposed to be. They know what they're supposed to do on a play. They know their assignment and they're not acting upon it. That could be the case as well. But what I saw on the football field, you got guys like Mark Andrews and Ricard. They're blocking. Now they release up the field, turn around, boom, the ball's on me. Getting big time chunks off of players like that. The screen game was working for the Baltimore Ravens. You got Gus Edwards. He's another guy. Blocking, release, boom, hit me with the screen. So I think that was the biggest thing that I saw, and I say, okay, other things in the passing game, okay, maybe you're not winning your one-on-one in the pass rush game, but this is fundamentals. This goes back to day one. How can you not stop a play like this? So that was something that was frustrating. I think that when we talk about the RPO game, it is tough to defend. He had a couple RPOs to Odell, some of the other guys, but I look at all of that and say, okay, fundamentally, that's where I come back to and say we got to be better in that aspect. And it was a lot of that got them big time chunk plays for the Baltimore Ravens. And then, like I said, outside of that, it's hard to really run any variation of man or zone coverage when we don't have a pass rush. It really looked like Aiden Hudson and everybody else. Now they have players on the defensive line. And I said for the Detroit Lions, if I feel like you can make a move to take it over the top, it's defensive line for me. Now I understand there's other players out there. There's other positions, maybe a running back with Montgomery being hurt. We don't know the duration of his process recovery, but I think we can look at that and say, okay, maybe there's some receivers on the market, some guys who are unhappy. I said, I understand why you would see that and why you may want that. If you could get both, get both. But I look at defensive line. Those are the guys who are going to make big time plays. Those are the guys who can help stifle the run game. Those are the guys who can get the quarterback on the ground. Lamar Jackson had all day. Seriously, when we look at some of those touchdowns, I believe it was the second touchdown in the first half. I mean, this guy dropped back. They were in man coverage. It was on Brian Branch. He was covering all day. And you look at it and say, okay, if I'm Brian Branch and I give up this touchdown, I'm covering the best I can. And it's not like I'm not covering good because Lamar Jackson had about 7 to 8 seconds to throw the football. So the first route is obviously not there, but it's that second playability. Something we can talk about with Jared Goff a little later, the lack of that second playability. And that's not a knock on Goff, but it's saying that if you blitz him, if you have some of these other things, or if you don't even get pressure, he's going to struggle once he gets outside of the pocket, trying to make some of those throws on the run, trying to do some of those different things because he's not as athletic. So we get back to that and we say, okay, Lamar Jackson, we have a guy who can get out of the pocket and we're not getting any pressure on him. He has all day to throw. He's going to make the big time play because even if you're a receiver, you don't have to be the best route runner. You have that second play reaction. You have that scramble drill ability. Now you're getting open because Lamar's understanding where you're going to be with the football. It's extremely hard as a defensive back, safety or corner, to cover like that. And also, one thing I do want to talk about, struggling with motion. If we're trying to inside out this thing, if we're trying to match it, we got to be on point. If I'm saying, okay, I understand the number 2 receiver is motioning to the outside, I'm Cam Sutton. I'm the outside corner. I have this guy. And you're not understanding that because if you're Cam Sutton, why am I the guy who's playing off coverage as well? I'm about 7 to 8 yards off the ball. Why do I have to guard the guy who's releasing inside when you're already inside as the safety? I think that's a big time thing we look at. This goes back to practice. These are things we have to see on day one. So I think we could talk about Aaron Glenn. We can talk about scheme. We have to talk about players as well. And we also have to give credit to the Baltimore Ravens who saw some things on film and exploited some of those things. So like I said, huge offensive game for those guys. And also getting into the run game, I thought read option. Struggle with read option and really getting outflanked. With Aiden Hudson, some of the different guys on the edge, you cannot get outflanked. Now, this also comes back to the guys in the secondary. If we have that safety coming down in certain formations or even linebackers, we have to keep the outside shoulder free. It's frustrating because it seems like I'm piling on, but these were things that popped up again and again and again on film, and we have to talk about it, of course, because I want to know what you guys think. And again, this is not an indicator of who the Detroit Lions are, but this is who they were on Sunday, so we have to talk about it. And one thing I do want to get to, this is the last thing defensively. Tracy Walker was not adequate against the run. When he played inside of the box, and I don't know how many snaps he was playing inside of the box, I think it was about at least 20 yard to 30 yard snaps inside of the box in certain formations. When he's doing that, he has to understand we got to play downhill. We got to be physical. I did not see any physicality from him. Now, he made a couple plays in the run game. Okay. But he gave up some big-time plays. I understand he's not a linebacker really traditionally. He's playing that safety role down into the box, but still got to be a little more physical. And I think it was good by the Ravens playing those twin sets, sometimes sending the trips to the other side of the formation because Brian Branch, he's our nickel corner. He has to get out there and cover that. So now we take him away from the box. We put Tracy Walker into a compromised position, and we feel we got a good shot at the run game. Like I said, Todd Monken, you called it up and you executed on that. So I really like to see that. Of course, we got guys for the Ravens. The offensive line, Ronnie Stanley, Morgan Moses, those guys were blocking their tails off. Hats off to those guys, but we look at some things for the Lions and say, okay, got to be better. Now, last thing I want to touch on is offense. Offense for the Detroit Lions. Now, first things first, I think it's tough when you try to come from behind. They were down very early. Even in the first half, it got ugly pretty quick. So when you pair some of those drives, we're going 3 and out, and we have these things going on, and then the Baltimore Ravens, they're scoring the football, and it's not taking them that long. So you pair some of those drives along with a 3 and out, so now you have an ugly game. I think it took them some time to get into rhythm, but they couldn't lean on the run game like they typically want to. And this is another conversation that we're going to have. Some of you have probably already had, but I think Jahmyr Gibbs actually had a good game overall. I just think you need another guy. Now, Craig Reynolds, he got it. He made some play. He made some big time plays. I'll give my hats off to him. But I think that when we talk about that heavy hitter, the guy who's going to come in and put his hard hat on and run, get that time of possession flowing like a David Montgomery, I just don't see that on the team, absent of David Montgomery. So do you want to go out and get somebody? Do you want to look elsewhere? Maybe a guy off of somebody's practice squad, maybe make a little trade, send a 4th or a 5th round pick. Those are questions you have to be asking because I think this team really wants to lean on their run game. If they could have leaned on their run game in this game, you don't have the Baltimore Ravens getting the football back when they're so hot offensively. So it's just something I point to. Of course, maybe, in a different scenario, different type of game, you don't think it's as big of a need, but it's just something I looked at and want to talk about with you guys. They really struggle with slants on the defensive line from the Baltimore Ravens. And we're going to talk about one guy, and that's Justin Matabuke. Number 92, if you saw him on the football field, he flashed. He was a game record on the interior for the Baltimore Ravens. And I'm looking at Graham, and I'm looking at Big V on the other side at the right guard. And it's like, what are we doing here? We understand, like I said, these are day one things that we have to learn. So if we got a guy slanting across the defensive line, and then also one thing I want to point to, we talk about Big 58, Penei Sewell did not have a great game as well. So these guys really struggle on the offensive line. And of course, with Goff, he wants to hit that back foot, read the progression, and let the ball go. He couldn't do that. We saw some of the pump fakes. We saw hitches in his throwing motion because he's not 100% sure of what he's seeing. And I think also a part of that goes in credit to Mike McDonald. He had a very good scheme. He showed some different coverages that really said, okay, if I'm Goff, I'm looking at this. I don't like my first read, and I don't really like my second read. And what I think they did a lot, they brought down the safety into to the flat. Sometimes we see linebackers dropping into that flat, and then we let the receiver get behind him, maybe if he's one or two. But when you drop the safety down into the flat, now those throwing windows, now those slants, and now those seam routes, we got a guy right in the thick of it. I really like to see that from that team. And you don't see as much teams doing it. Some teams try to implement it into their scheme, but if you come out in a too high set, you rotate one safety back to the deep third, and then you rotate one down into the flat or in the seam. Overall, getting back into the Detroit Lions offense, like I said, you got those guys on the interior struggling. Panay Sewell has some holding calls. Odafe Oweh for the Baltimore Ravens, we've been worrying about him. We've been talking about him coming on. He made some big time plays in this game. He was getting pressures. He had a sack. So just to see that from number 99 on the Ravens side of the football, pretty good to see it. But Panay Sewell, just I think an uncharacteristic game. Seeing how they weren't able to handle basic slants off of the defensive line, basic stunts off of the defensive line. They had twists, and it seemed like the communication wasn't there. And this goes to defense and it goes to offense. So I'm looking at that and I have to talk about it. But one guy who had a big time play in the run game, in the passing game. Now, you never can stop Amara St. Brown completely, but I think he had a good game on him to slow him down a bit. That's Arthur Millette, number 10 for the Baltimore Ravens. He was blitzing, had a sack on Jared Goff, and it was one of those fire blitzes when you're coming from trips. And although it's tight splits, and this is why he could have blitzed, because they have the tight splits closer to the line of scrimmage. So I'm looking at that and say, okay, now Goff is not even looking at me. He's reading the right side of the field. He's looking at Sam Laporta. I'm coming from depth, and I'm getting this sack. Big time play from him, understanding what he can do and what he can do from that position. I think that's huge for him. But also, he was lined up against Amara St. Brown and covered sometimes, made some big time plays. You got those safeties over the top, and I think that they helped him to a certain extent. But sometimes it was number 10 or number 14, and number 10 won some of those battles. So shout out Arthur Millette, having a huge game. You don't have that game, you struggle a lot more on the defensive side of the ball if you're Baltimore. And like I said, getting back out to it, I think that you pair some of those short drives along with some of those Raven drives. When they're very hot on offense, it's going to be a long day, something that we talked about. And like I said, with Goff, I mean, he had the interception to Geno Stone, and that's just trying to make a play. Yeah, of course, it is a bad read. You don't understand I really didn't understand what he was seeing right there. It looked like a miscommunication with the receiver in the quarterback, but I could understand pushing the football down the field. You're down by three or more scores, so you're just trying to say, okay, let's get the ball down there. Now, you really couldn't get Jameson Williams involved, and like I said, you're struggling in pass protection a little bit. Now, if you want to get him involved, kind of like you do with Khalif Raymond, you get him in some of these screen plays, just getting the football in his hands, getting him in space. I think that could be huge for J-Mo. And just get him some more confidence. Just get him more touches on the football. It doesn't have to all be a deep shot. So I think that they tried to get him some underneath things, but of course, Lamar Stevens, Marlon Humphrey, it was good coverage in some of those spots. He had 6 targets without any catches. So I think that they're trying, and what a lot of Lions fans may not want to hear, they're taking their time with J-Mo. They're trying to really grow him into the offense. And it's not like he can just come in and from day one be a huge impact player. I just think that's kind of an unrealistic expectation. But as we get further into these weeks, as we get closer into the playoffs, by the first playoff game, he should be a key cog in the offense. So you may not want to say, okay, why are we waiting with the first round pick? Why are we waiting with the guy who came out of Alabama, runs like nobody else can run? Why are we waiting with this guy? Just take a little time, understand what they're trying to do. Understand you can trust Ben Johnson, one of the best, if not the best offensive mind in the game. But like I said, though, I think that it was good to see Gibbs performing, Jared Goff getting thrown off of his progression, some of the things I saw. Overall, an ugly game, and I go back to fundamentals because it's something that I harp on, something that I think that for the Baltimore Ravens, we saw those fundamentals. We saw those linebackers flying around, and they brought pressure on Goff. That's something that you have to do because if he stands back in the pocket, he's gotten to a point where he's going to read that thing out, he's going to understand what he's seeing, and the ball is going to be going, and it's going to be accurate, and it's going to be on time. Jared Goff is a very good quarterback. I'm not jumping off the Detroit Lions. I'm not jumping off on Goff, but I do want to give my hats off to the Baltimore Ravens. Huge game. These are all the details. These are my game observations, of course. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm having to stop this video. I got to go to class. Got to get there. But thank you for watching as always. Again, don't forget to comment. I want to know what you guys think. Am I right? Maybe I'm seeing something different than what you guys are seeing. That's going to do it for today. And now, we out.